All right, so it's 1 o'clock. I'd like to welcome everybody for the Clean Energy, Good for Land Farmers and Rural Communities session. Today, we're going to be learning about how renewable energy provides economic benefits to rural communities and a stable revenue stream for Wisconsin farmers that allows them to continue generations of land stewardship. And we have 4 awesome experts here with us today. Our moderator is going to be Stanley Minnick from Arch Electric. Right now, he is the solar experience and branch manager at the Madison office for Arch, and that company has had 17 years of history in clean energy. Before joining Arch, Stanley worked for Organic Valley Cooperative, and he led the cooperative's effort to reach 100% renewable electricity in their own facilities through the Organic Valley Community Solar Partnership, also known as Butter Solar. So we're really excited to have everyone here, but before we start, I'd like to stop and thank Northwind as our sponsor today. We really appreciate you guys for sponsoring this program, and it couldn't be done without you. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Stanley, who's going to lead this session.
Thanks a lot, Lauren, and thanks everyone for joining us today. Obviously, there's a lot to discuss, and just to kind of build on the introduction that Lauren gave, I think that clean energy in Wisconsin and farmers are about as inextricably linked as anywhere in the country. I think the number of farms that we have and the number of people who make their living farming is pretty significant. So today we've got 3 fantastic guests to help us learn a little bit more about how they've maximized the ecological benefits of solar and other clean energy projects through the adoption of pollinator habitat. We'll talk a little bit maybe about some sheep and things of that nature. I'll give the introductions here on our guests. I'll start with Bob Bishop. Bob and his family are the owners of C.R. Bishop and Sons, Inc. It's a family farm in Iowa County in Cobb, Wisconsin. They've leased hundreds of acres of land to the 300 megawatt Badger Hollow solar farm out in Iowa County. And the Bishops have years of experience adapting and reinventing, whether dealing with hog prices or dairy prices that have made it difficult for them to thrive as a farm. So really excited to hear Bob's perspective on why their family chose to go with this land lease for solar. And happy to have you here, Bob. Thank you. And then we've got Corrine Daniels is the next guest. She's from Applied Ecological Services and Taylor Creek Restoration Nurseries. So she's, as the director of Applied Ecological Services, she works with landowners on a number of restoration projects, from native ground cover for large scale restoration, some on solar projects, some that's just a more traditional restoration project. And she worked her way up, from a field hand, working with these plants, and now is a director and offering insight from kind of the entire process of plant selection and implementation on site. So really excited to have you. Thank you, Corrine. And then lastly, we have Darcy Shiber-Knowles, and she is the Director of Operational Sustainability and Innovation at Dr. Bronner's. I think most of us have probably heard of Dr. Bronner's, but they are a top-selling natural soap brand in the U.S., and they've had leadership as a group, and Darcy's led their efforts in regenerative organic agriculture, as well as partnering with the Butter Solar project, the partnership there, and supporting a solar project in Iowa. So we're really excited to have Darcy. She's been working with Dr. Bronner since 2013 and also led their efforts to secure 100% renewable power. So thanks to all of you, and thanks again to the guests. If we could go ahead, we've got a little poll question that should be able to pop up here in a couple minutes. If while we're going through this, if y'all could fill that out, the attendees, it'll help us know who's on the panel, and it might shape the questions we ask a little bit. So to kick things off, I will ask the first question of Darcy. Darcy, Dr. Bronner's is an internationally known soap company from California. why in the heck are you at Renew Wisconsin? Why were you developing solar in the Midwest to begin with?
Yeah, absolutely, Stanley. And thank you so much for having me. It's really fun to be here with you all. Dr. Bronner's made a commitment to be 100% renewably powered before we knew what that would entail. We just knew that it mattered for our brand and for our consumers and for the planet. So we started that project with an on-site solar development, carports in our parking lot, and that provided we thought it would provide more than it actually ended up providing. It was about 40% of our electricity needs on site at our factory in Vista, which is San Diego County, California. And then we partnered with our utility provider, SDG&E, who you can pay a premium to buy renewable power from the San Diego grid, which is about 45% renewable already. Now, what that meant is that based on the way that the solar panels worked, is that if we were running our equipment when the sun was shining, we were drawing from the sun, and that's beautifully elegant. But when we were operating in the dark because the sun hadn't come up, or it was evening, or it's a gray day or a rainy day, we don't get a lot of snow in San Diego, but nevertheless, you know, solar panels aren't always operating at 100% efficiency. Then we would be drawing from the grid at that 45% renewable mix, which meant that 55% on in that given moment was conventional. And so we knew, and that wasn't eligible for EcoChoice, the program with the utility. So we knew we needed some other way to make the full 100%. And we started looking for RECs, renewable energy certificates. And you can buy RECs from giant offshore wind projects, kind of anonymous. But Dr. Bronner's is deeply committed to transparency in our supply chain, to ensuring sustainability and advancing sustainability in whatever ways we can. And I heard about the Butter Solar project from my colleague, friend, and former boss, Jonathan Reinbold, and it was an award-winning project, still in the early stages of rolling out at the time. And I thought, oh my goodness, how can we be a part of this? It ties, we would be able to purchase RECs from this project, community supported solar, in a part of the country where the grid was not 45% renewable, in a part of the country where, you know, an agricultural heart of our country that needs more pollinator habitat. And the deal was with this community supported solar project that either these were smallholder organic farmers who wanted to go green but didn't have the capital to invest in the infrastructure at their farm, or they were conventional farmers or landowners who were willing to put pollinator habitat underneath the panels. So this is a project where we're increasing renewables in a part of the country where the grid doesn't have a ton. We're increasing pollinator habitat in an agricultural part of the country. And we're working in partnership with some of our great allies, fellow B Corp, One Energy, and fellow natural products industry ally, Organic Valley. And we could actually go to the farm, meet the landowner there in Lanesboro, and that fit perfectly with what we were looking for. In addition, it was kind of a win-win-win project where nobody was trying to squeeze the maximum dollar value. We were all trying to benefit the greater good, and that really felt like mission alignment for us, and it was a good deal on RECs. Yeah. So that's what brought soap makers to the Midwest for purchasing and getting involved in solar, Stanley, and you were just a phenomenal partner in that project, amazing leader, and we were proud to be a small part of a really cool model.
Yeah, I appreciate the kind words, Darcy. At the last Renew Summit, I got to talk a lot about that project, and I think a lot of the credit, as you know, goes to Eric Udelhoffen for his work on that, actually. But yeah, so coming to the Midwest, an opportunity to advance the impacts beyond what you could do in a place where you can't go 5 feet without stepping on a solar farm, I imagine. So thank you for that insight. We're going to switch gears and we're going to kind of do a round robin with questions. The other panelists, if y'all have anything you'd like to add after a response, just please hop in or let me know. Bob, I really was hoping to hear a little bit about what led you to the decision to lease this land for Badger Hollow. I mean, was it a financial motivation? Was it the environmental? Really, what motivated you at the end of the day?
Well, the financial situation. We in farming, that value-added product that you can take to market is key anymore. We used to raise a lot of hogs, and that industry basically took a hard turn chasing a new efficiency back in the through the 90s, early 2000s. And we made the mistake of thinking that this was a storm, you weather the storm, we're already in it, we're already built, we already have the herd, etc. So we got ourselves a little debt problem built up from staying in it too long. Wish we pulled the plug years earlier. We effectively pulled out in 2001, 2002. Still running some cattle, but the hogs was the primary value-added product. So then we were more heavily into cash grain. Well, cash grain is not a value-added product per se. It doesn't have the margin or the size cash flow of the livestock business. So we were limping along, as they say, stretching a penny from all four corners as far as you could. And through the 2000s, the price of land took off disproportionately, increasing, which is good in your background because it's given you more latitude, more equity to be able to borrow against, etc. But you're struggling. You can't make good progress on that debt that you racked up. And you'll have some marketing down years where you can't even cover your operating expenses. So you end up biting off a little bit more debt to keep going. Then you have an uptick in the markets, the 2010, 11, 12, 13. When you had the 2012 drought, well, that put grain markets well up into the profitability for a couple of years before they followed their natural tendency to retrace back down to the historic lows, which they do. Leaving us, we just about to the point that we'd stretched about as far as we could stretch. We run about 2,000 acres. We own 1,850 of it, and we were to the point where we were probably going to have to sell off about 10% of our acreage, about 180 acres, in order to just reset the debt, try and clear some of it, etc. Really don't want to do that. In farming, you spend a lifetime with the opportunity here to add land. You don't want to turn it back away. That was in 2017 when Dan Litchfield of Invenergy showed up at our door, and as I generally like to say, he had us at hello. We knew, we could see the numbers on this. This is good. This is going to be a consistent cash flow, etc. So we better go in on this. And that's more or less sums it up. We were in need. A few years earlier, we had put some solar panels on building that we had. A company approached us about it, and we went and put them on. As my sons are saying, the early adapters to a new technology are usually the ones who are profitable. The later ones to come in, the laggards, are usually getting there after it's just down to the crumbs. So, yeah, we started out in solar, putting those panels on buildings. They're still there. They're still working quietly. Yep. And we also have this project now going up on acreage. So that's excellent. About who we are, I guess.
Thanks, Bob. And it struck me just, you talked so much about just that up and down roller coaster of farming and land prices and commodity prices. But then here you've got this nice, stable lease payment that is there an escalator? Is it a flat? I mean, I don't know if you want to talk about any of the details.
I was going to point out to you that you're running a little flat there. It has a cost of living escalator built into it.
Hmm.
and it's a minimum 2% per year. It's
Yep.
either one of those indexes, cost of living indexes, or a minimum 2%. So there is growth there.
Yep.
And if the economy, goes crazy and you start having bad inflation issues, it'll grow faster. So
Yeah. So it's a nice hedge in a lot of ways. So that's really great. Thanks, Bob, and look forward to hearing more from you as we go on. Corrine, I've heard that in implementing pollinator habitat is really simple and easy under solar panels. Is that right?
Well, everyone's work is easy, isn't that true?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I do. I wonder if you could just expand on, I think it'd be beautiful if it was as simple as just copy pasting a seed mix or something of that nature. But I think it's more nuanced. And I think looking at the guests, we've got about 44% of folks that are attending, and there's some 70 folks listening, which is great. Those are folks that are developing projects. So I think they'll really like to hear how you start and maybe some of the challenges instead of just the pretty pictures, if you will.
Oh, sure. And yeah, thanks for that. And you're absolutely right. I mean, there's not a cookie cutter approach, particularly when it comes to these large scale solar operations. Our company's been doing restoration, pollinator habitats, all other kinds of habitats since the 70s. And for us, these large solar projects were just a great fit. We are always looking for ways to bring that science of ecology to all land use decisions. That's one of our missions. And so for us, particularly in the Midwest, solar is really exciting. And when we started to see these trends to implement pollinator, then we decided it was time for us to get even more plugged in than we already were. But as you mentioned, pollinator is not necessarily that simple. And it kind of depends on the approach you're taking. If you're trying to tailor it more to all, if you will, all native versus maybe not so much, maybe more traditional kind of hay crops, it can be more or less challenging. Now we know that with the solar panels, height is a big concern. So particularly in the Midwest, when we think about our native ecosystems, you think of like these really tall species. I mean, sometimes, they can be 10 feet tall and not very compatible, of course, the solar panels where you want to keep shade off. And that's where our expertise comes in, because species native to the Midwest, there are thousands of them. And actually there are many really great matches for solar, but it's kind of a mix and match, and it's very site specific.
So the process when you first arrive at a site, is it really just how much of the existing land use comes into it?
That's a huge part. And that's one thing that I do when I get plugged into the projects early on, is we look at the history of the land use. Are there going to be herbicide carryovers? Lots of times, we'll hear this from the farmers. They'll say, oh, don't worry about it. There's not going to be any carryover issues. And sometimes they're spot on and sometimes they're not spot on. And the difference is that particularly some of these pre-emergent herbicides, they don't have an impact on larger seeded crops, maybe soybeans and corn, things that we traditionally think of as conventional ag. But when you start trying to come in with small seeded crops, not only natives, but some turf grasses and other things, they can be more impacted, and those carryovers are longer. So that's a very important consideration. Obviously, erosion is a consideration. Weed infestation is a huge concern on these large scale solar projects. So we're looking at, what's not only what's on the site, but what's around the site, so that helps us select the best vegetation matches for that site. Again, we're always trying to skew it toward native, because we feel that is the best, and we've seen that is the best for soil building, which is a very important consideration, erosion control, groundwater recharge, reduction in pesticide use, of course, the pollinator, grassland birds, all of that. But this is not restoration. We're talking about ground cover, not restoration.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the nuance there, and I think a lot of the folks that are joining will as well. So thank you for that. Um, So I believe y'all should be able to see some photos here. I've just got a few slides that I'm just gonna show of the project in Cashton, Wisconsin. And this photo in the front here, you can see there's obviously some nice um, pollinator habitat that's just kind of growing along the fence row there from where I was standing. You can see obviously the solar in the background there. And you talked, Corrine, about working with what is already there. In this case, we had cool season grasses that had been established for gosh knows how long.
Mhm.
And we looked at the idea of doing more of the traditional, heavy, high intensity pollinator plantings. And after a lot of consultation with some experts, realized that it probably wouldn't stick as an organic piece of land in particular, unless we were going to come back and burn consecutively for multiple years and have an ongoing battle with this land. So the decision in this case was made instead to work with the neighbor, who was an Amish farmer who had been grazing his sheep on that land for a number of years, just kind of a good neighbor agreement. And to this day, I just checked in with Nicole at Organic Valley a little while ago, and that arrangement has worked out great so far. The sheep are not located on the solar array every day of the year. They're only brought on 2, 3, 4 times a year as needed to sort of mob graze down. But I just wanted to share some photos because this is what it probably looks like outside if any of you are near projects today. And I much prefer this photo.
If I could mention here, Stanley, this
Yeah.
is, and we have, we're doing research now, not necessarily in solar projects, but we're seeing that this mob style grazing is very, a really good match for restoration. It helps keep down woody vegetation, and actually it simulates, whether it's cattle or sheep, which of course cattle aren't a great match for solar, but it really simulates what bison
Yeah.
and other large scale grazers were doing on these natural ecosystems. And so it's actually a fantastic blend. And while we haven't actually helped design a full vegetation management strategy for a project that is incorporated yet, sheep, we have worked with companies who are planning to do that and help to develop seed mixes for that. And of course, when you're doing that, you're going to bring grazers in. There's a whole bunch of other considerations. Not only what veg is going to withstand that, and much of it will, but the health of the animals. Important consideration. There are lots of great natives that are awesome fit for that, but you do need to do your research.
Yep, I remember we had a lot of conversations about, is this actually going to be something the sheep are going to want to eat?
Mhm.
And in this case, it has been. So, thank you for the extra insight there. This photo, one of the things we're talking about in the economic impacts as well, and you can see those folks out there in the orange vests. I'm guaranteeing most of us don't work as hard as those folks, and every time you invest in these projects and more of them go in, it's more folks that are going to get to do this work. And a lot of them, I mean, frankly, I know a lot of folks that work in the industry that came from a farming background and like working with their hands. And it's just a different way to kind of harvest something from the sun, if you will. So Darcy, as a more of a corporate client, I guess I'm hoping you could just speak a little bit more with, and you kind of hinted at it and talked about it already, but just if you could elaborate on um, why was it appealing to your group? Why were these projects more appealing than something else that would have been out there? One of those more anonymous projects that you talked about.
Yeah, Dr. Bronner's cares about transparency in our supply chain, and we care about relationships. We care about community. And this is a project that succeeded because of community. One of the really cool things about it is that, as I mentioned, I was able to go to Lanesboro and meet the landowner and stand there under the solar panels. And we talked about how that community, because of the solar panel project, that community was now going to be, I think, something like 30% renewably powered. And they got excited because the landowner was the first person in that community to install solar. But then the neighbors started noticing, and the community said, hey, wow, our electricity costs are going down and we're going green. It's almost a no-brainer, but somebody has to make the first move. So it's the beginning of community transformation where we can have the start of a ripple effect, a very small role in something where, because of relationships, because of community, and because of collaboration, it can be a bigger, more positive, long-term transformational impact. You can purchase RECs off the market generally, but they're anonymous. It's, an investment bank, offshore wind in China, and not that renewables anywhere else are not good. That's not what I'm saying. What we wanted to find was something that both got at our 100% renewably powered claim goal and also had other benefits. So sequestration of carbon underneath the panels, pollinator habitat underneath the panels, influencing the grid in a part of the country that doesn't have as much renewable, getting people excited about the potential of renewables, supporting rural communities, supporting smallholder farmers. It's just win, 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 win all over the place, beyond just getting the REC that we were looking to purchase to be able to make our corporate claim. So many reasons why this project was more appealing than other more anonymous options. And it's just more satisfying to do business with people who care about others and want relationships that matter and who are investing in their community. It's frankly, we all work hard and we all have, things you need to get done because it's your job to get it done. And it's so much more satisfying to work in collaboration with people who are trying to leave the world a better place for their communities and those beyond. So yeah, it's not a short answer because there are so many positive things to say about community supported solar.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And Bob, Darcy talked a little bit about, the impact in a community. As somebody that's been, familiar with solar for quite a while, I'm kind of curious what the response in the local community was when this project did come up. Obviously, there's public hearings. And frankly, I mean, just to put it plainly, did you get anybody in the community that was opposed to the development? And if so, what were those conversations like? And maybe don't name any names, Bob.
Yeah, there was some opposition. There's also a core group of landowners that really never flinched, that make up the project. One of the oppositions, of course, was the 5 acres of paradise. We live here, and we don't ever want to look out our window and see solar panels out there on that neighbor's property. Well, first thing, remember, it's the neighbor's property. The neighbor has land rights, property rights. Actually, and kind of a curious thing, the 5 acres of paradise is a function of the cheap food policy, disposable income, and the government multiplier effect. If you keep food cheap, people have money to spend, etc. Right? Okay, keeping food cheap is part of why that 5 acres was available to begin with, because it was no longer a viable working farm. Excuse me. So they had. I'm going to do this, aren't I? A little tickle in the throat at the wrong time. Yeah. You get the idea. You might want to go on and come back. Just let this up.
I think you're muted, Stanley.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, thanks, Bob. We'll just we'll keep her moving here, and hopefully you get that frog out of your throat, and then we'll unmute you. So, Corrine, since you're not coughing, we'll pivot to you. And basically, I just kind of wonder, were you aware of any of the discussion going on in the community, or was your company or the folks you work with, were they brought in to kind of talk about these stacked benefits to the local environment, or not?
Well, we were brought in to help explore that, how we could work with, it was Invenergy, an Invenergy project, how we could work with Invenergy to help do some of the listening, and particularly NGOs, understanding what their priorities were going to be in that particular area. I mean, that's the big thing, right? To come in and listen, because there aren't cookie cutter approaches. And well, I somewhat hesitate to say this, but it is the truth that, even if you had taken it out of corn and put it in turf grass, there would be some ecological benefit there. And so, one of our particularly in Badger, one of our roles was to help do some thinking about what was going to be the best approach for this project in particular. And one thing I'd like to take this opportunity to talk about, I've seen kind of throughout the regions, different approaches to what is being required of these solar projects, particularly when it comes to pollinator projects. And you kind of see these differences, right? Where, so in some cases, the bar is really high. And I've seen some of these, these projects come in, and it's almost point in some regions where you could see that it'd be priced out, almost unbuildable, that the bars are so high. And in some areas, almost no expectation. And I think there's kind of a happy medium, right? I mean, we want to have some expectation. And again, probably on a case-by-case basis, where we want to make sure that these projects remain buildable, that we're not going to shut this down. As this is right now really a major conservation movement, not just on the energy side, but on the land use side. Huge opportunities for ecosystems. As I said before, pollinators, grassland birds, our water. We got to be sure that we aren't shutting that down.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And it kind of, I'm kind of curious, Darcy, as a company that's leading the charge in the forefront of regenerative organic agriculture, obviously, I think your vision of what the best farms look like is maybe different than a conventional farmer. And I'm just kind of curious how you think, or what you think about the idea of, what is potentially something that would be considered controversial, taking land out of food production to put into solar. How do you kind of square the friction there between food production, ecological benefit, and then hosting these arrays on conventional farms that don't really meet the Dr. Bronner's regenerative ag kind of approach?
Well, Stanley, there's a lot there. And
yeah, I'm sorry about that.
oh no, it's all good. It's exciting. These are really juicy, meaningful discussions. And I hope the conversation today is a spark that the folks who are joining us can continue the conversation. 1% of ag in the US is certified organic in terms of acreage. And that's not enough. And we know that conventional ag is responsible for 25% of global carbon emissions. Yet, regenerative organic ag can be part of the climate solution. And so how do we scale? How do we go from 1% organic to a more expanded approach where we're sequestering carbon? And we've got to be able to work with folks at every stage of the farming journey. And farmers are not, it's not like we're going to stack rank farmers in terms of their goodness. I'm grateful to anyone who's willing to provide food, to grow for us, for those of us who can't do that. That's amazingly important work. So if we're going to be moving to a world where we are sequestering more carbon through the agricultural models that we have, then emitting, we're going to need to work with folks who identify as conventional, who identify as organic but not regenerative, folks who've never heard of regenerative. And we know that small scale farms promote biodiversity. Smallholder farmers take a more holistic approach typically to growing, to land management, and that network of smallholders can actually provide enough food for us that we don't need to worry about losing a little bit of land, conventional land, for animal feed. We can promote biodiversity, we can promote pollinator habitat, we can convert a little bit here, and we'll be fine. And then we're broadening the tent, broadening the dialogue, and including more people in the journey to the kind of agricultural and carbon positive world we need to be moving towards. So
Thank
it's
you.
not an either or. I think it's a complex conversation.
Yeah, and I maybe set you up for it is a big picture. We could maybe spend the whole 45 minutes talking about the degrees of sustainability. But, Bob, I think it's interesting, when we spoke, we talked a little bit about the fence rows and about the temporary nature of these projects when you step back and look at it.
I'd like to just comment when you're
Sure.
talking about convincing farmers about the difference between food and electricity. We've been marketing our corn to an ethanol plant now for the last 10 to 15 years because that's the closest local terminal, the minimal amount of shipping costs, et cetera. If you take a average acre of corn, convert it to ethanol, put it in the average car of the average family, they get 0.85 car years of fuel. They drive into October before they run out of gas. If you take the average farm acre and put it on solar panels, then you can drive the average modern electric car 74 car years. Now that's 74 full years versus divided by 0.85. So when you ran out of gas in October, 74 of your neighbors all made it to the New Year's Eve party, presumably home too. If you take 74 and divide it by 0.85, you come up with a number that is approximately 91 plus, 92 in that neighborhood. That is I want to say quantum leap. It's, 10-fold is one jump, 100-fold is a massive jump. At 91 plus, that is quite the jump. Now, I'm already in the energy business because I've been selling corn for ethanol for all these years anyway. Now, suddenly, I can sell a product that the public has a far greater demand for. As I've said in the past, the commodity markets, we've just been through elections, et cetera. We don't want to talk about it, but all politicians watch polls all the time, right? Mm-hmm. And those polls are up and down depending on which way the wind is blowing and whether they're, whether they shave that day. The commodity markets are the opinion poll that actually matters because those people are backing up their opinions with dollars. That's investment into those opinions. So when the commodity markets are saying that we have ample amount of corn and we're only valuing corn at this level, and you can turn around and sell electricity and do 90 some times the benefit to society because society says they want the electricity, then that really should answer the question as to whether or not you're doing something that's wrong in some way by going out of food production. Now, by doing that, 1 acre of solar panels frees up 74 acres of corn for other food use. Because if you start parking all of the Chevys and start driving the Teslas, then your consumption of the fuels, the consumption, the need for ethanol, et cetera, is going to dwindle as this happens. And you're solving the problem that you're worried about. So the argument against taking it out for that purpose just doesn't hold up.
Bob,
Now, you
that's an
actually had a question you asked me. I suppose I could answer that now, maybe.
no, I really appreciate where you took that. Actually, that was, I do want to just, if we're ever going to get Chevy to sponsor the Renew Summit, I just want to remind everybody they have some electric vehicles. I drive one, they're great. So the other thing, that struck me was, and maybe we'll pivot to Corrine real quick and kind of the benefits of that land, sequestering carbon, being used in a different way over 25 years. And then, this isn't, in my understanding, this isn't a permanent use of land. This isn't something that is 100 years, 500 years. It's a 25 or 30-year contract. So Corrine, I wonder if you could start us off maybe with the few minutes that we have left, talking about kind of maybe some of the ecological things that are going on when land is used this way for 25 years.
Mm-hmm. Well, I hope that people in the Midwest are aware that the reason we have such awesome soils, particularly here in southern Wisconsin, Illinois, and Iowa, is because of we had the tall grass prairie here. In some cases, maybe the short grass or the mixed grass prairie, and that ecosystem over the thousands of years built this gorgeous, rich soil that I come from a farm background. So we're all, we're all proud of this gorgeous, rich soil. And research is showing that it doesn't actually, we can reap lots of benefits in only a couple decades, even a few years, by turning that back into native or native-like vegetation. We have, preference, of course, for native. And that's because the root systems are so extensive. We're not tilling the soil, and all kinds of things are going on. Not only just the above ground stuff that you see, but there's flora and fauna beyond the vascular plants that we think of that are working below the ground and building the soil. So, a family like the Bishop family, right? The goal is, you've been able to retire some debt, right? And you've got some income going on, and hopefully, in the 25 years when the grandkids, or maybe it's the great grandkids, and if the contract isn't renewed, you pull the solar panels out of there. There's no, we were talking about this the other day, Stanley, right? There's not concrete, it's just pilings. So you pull that out, and you ought to have better soils when it's all said and done.
Thank you, Corrine.
Yeah,
Bob, could you build on? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Corrine.
No, I was going to say not only that, but also groundwater recharge, huge issue. Improved in the Cobb area where Badger project is, there are trout streams, improved waterways, so many benefits. And also, if I can pile on, there's also research that shows that small amounts of pollinator habitat have big benefits for the neighbors. So if you put a little pollinator habitat in, you get better production in your other properties.
Yep, specifically soybeans, I think, and then and then a lot of other crops. Bob, could you kind of build on just that discussion about what do you, when you envision 30 years from now that land, do you think it's going to be better, the same?
It's definitely going to be better.
Yeah.
Earlier we were talking about grazing, and the grass is putting sheep out there to do a concentrated grazing of them. As my son has pointed out to me, as the grass is growing, there's about the same amount of volume of mass below ground as there is above it. And that mass below ground is carbon sequestration, okay? Mm-hmm. When you come in and chew that off very close to the ground, all of that root mass tends to die and stay there. So that's sequestered carbon. The plant starts over growing more root system and growing taller again. So the idea of controlled grazing, where you come in and you really do get it chewed off, mowed off close to the ground, is one of the best ways to sequester more carbon, rather than just leaving it tall. So you have to pick your areas as to what you need in the late summer for the pollinator habitat and how much is grassland to function in that purpose.
Yep. Well, we are just at about time here, which is, I'm always blown away how fast these things go. I'm sure that based on the conversation we've had, we could probably go on another 45 minutes. I would encourage anybody that's watching. I'm by no means an expert in this arena, but I definitely have been fortunate enough to work with some people who are, and would be happy to connect you with folks. And I'm sure all the contact information for our guests is available as well. Before we conclude, I also want to send my thanks to Northwind Renewables for sponsoring this. Northwind is a member of Amicus Solar Cooperative, as is Arch Electric. And as far as solar companies in Wisconsin, I think they're up there with us, and maybe a handful of others that do really great work and support a very important organization. So thanks for everyone for attending. Thanks for the panelists, obviously, for giving us their insight. And then thanks to Renew for doing the hard work to make Wisconsin a more habitable place for solar farms. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.